A cold billionaire was shocked to see his loyal maid drenched in the rain. What he did next shocked everyone. Hello, welcome back. Remember to hit the like button and subscribe for more uplifting stories. Now sit tight, relax, and enjoy. That morning, Anna arrived late. Just 5 minutes, her eyes were red, her uniform damp from the storm, her hands trembling as she tried to hang her coat. Richard didn't ask why. He didn't want to. His voice was as dry as the ticking clock on the wall. "You're dismissed," he said. No warmth, no hesitation. Anna froze, staring at him as if she had misheard, but he did not repeat himself. He simply turned back toward his window, ending the matter with silence. No severance, no reference, no gratitude. The rain came down in sheets that Friday morning, drumming against rooftops and flooding the gutters of the city. Inside a marble mansion on the edge of Kingsway Road, Happ millionaire boss Richard Hale stood by the tall window of his study. Sipping black coffee, Richard was known in every financial circle as a sharp man, sharper than steel and colder than the rain outside. His businesses stretched across the continent. His reputation, however, never stretched toward kindness. His staff knew him as strict, impossible to please, and utterly uninterested in anything beyond results. For 3 years, Anna had worked in his house as a maid. She was quiet, disciplined, always the first to arrive and the last to leave. Every morning, the fire in his private study was already burning before he entered. His shirts were folded perfectly, his tea served at 6 without fail. He never asked her a personal question, never knew her story, never once thought about her life outside his gates. To him, she was simply efficient and invisible. And now he just disposed her like she was trash. It broke her, but she didn't beg. She didn't cry, she only lowered her head, nodded, and walked out of the only warm shelter she had known for years. What Richard never realized was that Anna had been secretly sleeping in the corner of the laundry room for months. Her wages were never enough. Every coin she earned went to her sick mother in the countryside and to keep her younger brother in school. When rent prices soared, she gave up her room. Instead, she cleaned by day and hid by night, surviving on scraps of rest. Now dismissed with nothing, she stepped into the rain. Her shoes were thin, her coat soaked within minutes. The city had no place for her. The shelters were already full, the bus station too dangerous, and she had no money left for even a ride. That night, she wandered until exhaustion forced her onto a wooden bench under a leaking streetlight in a quiet park. She thought she would rest her eyes for a moment, but the rain kept falling, soaking her uniform until it clung to her skin, draining the last of her warmth. By dawn, her fingers no longer moved. Her body shivered faintly before sinking into stillness. Richard was not a man who walked. He was driven everywhere, sealed away from the city in leather-lined cars. But fate played its hand that morning. His driver was delayed and his board meeting couldn't wait. Irritated, Richard grabbed his umbrella and decided to cut through the park near the business district. The rain had softened to a drizzle, leaving the earth smelling of wet soil and leaves. His polished shoes splashed through shallow puddles as he moved quickly, checking his watch with every step. Then, under the dim light of a lamp, he noticed a figure slumped on a bench. At first, he paid no mind. The city had its share of vagrants, but something about the soaked navy uniform caught his eye. He slowed, squinting. As he drew closer, his chest tightened. The woman's head was tilted sideways, her hair plastered against her face by the rain. Her apron, clinging and heavy, looked familiar. His stomach dropped. "Anna," his voice cracked with disbelief. There was no answer. He hurried forward, crouching beside her. Her lips were pale, parted slightly as though each breath was a battle. Her arms were wrapped around herself like a frightened child. He touched her shoulder and recoiled. Her skin was ice cold. "Anna." His voice was louder now, desperate. He shook her gently. Still nothing. For the first time in years, Richard felt panic. Not the kind that came from a lost deal or a crashing market, but something raw and human. He fumbled for his phone with trembling fingers, calling emergency services. His umbrella forgotten. His suit soaking through. While waiting for the sirens, he brushed rain from her arms, whispering her name as if that alone could bring her back. She looked smaller than he remembered, fragile, worn down by burdens he had never bothered to see. When the ambulance arrived, Richard didn't hesitate. He helped the medics lift her onto the stretcher, his heart racing. He followed the flashing lights through the streets, no longer her employer, but a man who finally realized he had overlooked a soul. Crying in silence right under his roof, the corridors of St. Mary's Hospital smelled faintly of antiseptic and rain-soaked clothing. Richard walked fast behind the stretcher, his heart pounding in a way unfamiliar to him. He was used to controlling meetings, markets, and men, but he had no control here. The nurses spoke quickly as they wheeled Anna into the emergency room. Severe hypothermia, one murmured. Get a warm IV line started. Another draped heated blankets over her. Richard stopped at the door, unable to follow further. The glass panel showed him a world he never cared to notice before. Fragile lives balanced on machines and nurses' hands. He pressed his palm against the cool glass, watching as tubes were connected, and an oxygen mask lowered gently over Anna's pale face. He sank onto the waiting bench outside, his drenched suit sticking uncomfortably to his skin. Calls buzzed on his phone, his assistant, his investors, even his daughter. He silenced them all. For once, the markets could collapse. And he wouldn't care. Hours passed, measured only by the beeps of machines and the shuffle of footsteps. Each time a nurse walked past, Richard's throat tightened, afraid of the news she might bring. Finally, a doctor approached. Mr. Hale. Richard stood so quickly his knees struck the bench. She's stable for now, the doctor said calmly. But it was close. Another hour outside and we wouldn't be having this conversation. Severe exposure. We'll keep her under observation for the next 24 hours. Relief rushed through him, heavy as the storm outside. His hands trembled when he sat back down. Later that night, he was allowed into her room. The fluorescent lights hummed softly. Anna lay motionless, her face half hidden under the oxygen mask. Her hair was still damp, strands sticking to her forehead. Her hands were wrapped in white bandages to keep the heat inside her body. Richard pulled a chair to her bedside. He didn't know what to say, so he sat in silence. Every now and then, he leaned forward, studying her face as though seeing it for the first time. He remembered the way she used to hum faintly while dusting the shelves, the careful way she handled his late wife's china set, how she once smiled at the sight of sunflowers in the kitchen window. But beyond that, he realized he knew nothing. Not where she lived, not who her family was, not what dreams she once carried before life pushed her here. His chest ACHD at the thought. She had been living in his house, working under his eyes for 3 years, and yet she had been invisible to him. Invisible until she was half dead on a bench. When midnight came, Anna stirred faintly. Her lips parted dry and cracked. Her eyelids trembled, then opened slightly. Richard leaned forward, his breath caught. Anna, he whispered. Her voice came out almost a rasp. Am I gone? He swallowed hard. No, you're alive. You're safe. Her gaze focused on him with confusion. Then her brows furrowed. Why are you here? His throat tightened. The words burned, but he spoke them anyway. Because I should have been long before today. Tears gathered at the corners of her eyes. She turned her face towards the wall and whispered, I wasn't lazy. I wasn't late before that day. Richard bowed his head, and I never asked why. That is my shame, not yours. The machines hummed between them, but neither spoke again. Richard didn't leave, awakening. The following morning the storm had passed. Sunlight filtered through the hospital windows. Catching on the pale curtains, Richard sat exactly where he had been the night before, his posture stiff, his eyes fixed on Anna's fragile breathing. When the doctor came in to check her vitals, Richard stood back, listening intently. She's improving, the doctor said, but recovery will take time. She needs warmth, rest, and nutrition. Richard nodded firmly. Give her whatever she needs. Don't hold back. By afternoon, Anna was able to sit up slightly, her eyes clearer, though still heavy with exhaustion. She looked at him with suspicion, her voice soft but steady. Why are you really here? Guilt? The question cut deeper than any accusation. He clasped his hands together, staring at the floor before answering. Because for years I built walls of marble and steel, and inside them I ignored the people who kept me standing. You suffered in my house, and I didn't see. I can't undo that, but I can change what happens next. She said nothing, only turned her gaze to the window, watching raindrops trace paths down the glass. Later, Richard called his household staff together at the mansion. They stood in shock as he spoke bluntly. I dismissed Anna without caring to know her story. Last night, it nearly killed her. I failed her. I failed all of you. His voice shook slightly, something none of them had ever heard. I am sorry, the confession rippled through the staff. Some shifted uncomfortably, others lowered their eyes. One woman openly cried. News of Anna's ordeal spread beyond the mansion. A jogger who had seen her on the bench had snapped a photo, which soon circulated online. Outrage followed. How could a millionaire let this happen to one of his own staff? Reporters camped outside the hospital demanding statements. Richard ignored them all. When asked, he simply said, I have more to do than talk. Days later, Anna was discharged. Outside the hospital entrance, a sleek black car waited, but not for her to return to work. Richard stood beside it, dressed in a simple navy suit, holding a thick coat and scarf. "This isn't charity," he said, soft, when she hesitated. "It's a correction." She wanted to refuse, her pride pressing hard against her ribs, but the hospital bills alone would bury her for years. Slowly, she accepted the coat. Richard smiled faintly. "Come to the guest wing, not to serve, but to recover. When you're ready, we'll talk about what you want, not what I expect." For the first time in years, Anna felt warmth that wasn't just from fabric. The weeks that followed changed everything. Anna stayed in a sunlit guest room in Richard's estate, where, for the first time in months, she slept without fear of being cold. A private doctor visited regularly. Her meals were rich with nutrients. Each evening, Richard came to check on her, not as an employer, but as a man learning how to listen. Slowly, Anna opened up. She spoke about her hometown, about a mother whose illness had drained every savings, about a brother she'd tried to protect with every coin she earned. She told him how she had once dreamed of becoming a teacher before life pressed her into survival. Richard listened, really listened, and something inside him cracked open. One quiet morning, as sunlight spilled across the marble floor, he made a decision. Sitting across from her at the breakfast table, he said, "Anna, I'd like to offer you something, a position, not as a maid, but as director of staff and employee welfare across all my properties. It will be your job to ensure no one is overlooked, no one is left behind. A full salary, benefits, and authority." Anna stared at him, her spoon frozen midair. "You trust me with that?" He met her gaze without hesitation. "I've never trusted anyone more." Months later, at a charity gala in the grand ballroom of his mansion, Richard took the stage, his voice carried through the glittering room filled with socialites and tycoons. "I once believed power was measured by the buildings I built and the deals I closed," he said. "But a woman who worked quietly in my home taught me otherwise. She showed me strength, not in wealth, but in perseverance, even when the world ignored her." Then he introduced her. Anna stepped forward in a simple navy dress, her hair neatly braided. The same crowd that once wouldn't have glanced twice now rose to their feet, not out of pity but respect. The maid no one noticed had become the woman who transformed everything. And the millionaire who once dismissed her found his redemption not through fortune, but through finally seeing the humanity right before him. If this story moved you, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe for more inspiring and emotional journeys. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We treasure every message from you. Until we return, stay kind, stay hopeful, and stay with us.